We broke ground on our garden 6 years ago, and ever since we've been working to improve our rocky clay soil, but it's still a work in progress. So this week we're building a few raised beds with a mix that gives us a shortcut to soft, rich soil right away. It's been years since we've grown in raised beds, but we're ready to give them another shot, primarily to make things easier for the kids. Two of my kids really love to garden, but they have had a couple struggles over the years that we've lived here. And it's mainly due to our in-ground garden. It's really hard to kind of delineate where a garden bed is where it isn't because it's all in ground. The other thing is they've struggled with weeds as well, which we pretty much cleared up last year. But I thought it would be really good for them to try raised beds. I think it's really going to help them to have good soil, good drainage. Hopefully this will be pretty weed-free for them and just keep it all organized and together so that they can have like a designated spot every year where they can grow their garden. We put together all the raised beds this morning. It went by so fast, it was really easy to do. Next step is to prep the area where we're gonna put them. We're gonna put them right here. This is where all of our mulch piles and compost piles have been. So there is not a lot of grass here other than a little bit of Bermuda grass, which has popped up through our mulch piles. Bermuda grass is a really bad thing to have underneath raised beds because it's so invasive, and it is really one of my biggest fears with having raised beds. So Cam is going to come through here with the tractor and scrape away as much of it as possible. And then the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to put down some weed barrier underneath the raised beds. We are not going to do a plastic. We will do a thick paper or cardboard or something underneath the raised beds. Yesterday, Cam went through and scraped this area. Today, we woke up to a few problems. One is that we had a ton of rain last night, and now this area is completely muddy and filled with water because it is lower than the surrounding ground, which is kind of good to see because now we know we actually need to push all of the dirt that we scraped off back. It wasn't a waste of time because Cam was able to scrape and loosen up all of the weeds, so we'll just pick out all of the Bermuda grass and all of that stuff when he pushes it back in place. And then we'll even everything out and lay down those garden beds. Our timing is just awful sometimes. We really need to do a better job of planning. In hindsight, we should have covered this whole area last night with silage tarp to keep off some of the rain, but we didn't do that. So now we are dealing with a lot of mud, and it is going to rain again lots of days next week. So we just got to get this done today no matter what. So we got this area as level as it's going to get for right now. Now it's time to bring the garden beds over here and position them. Our entire large garden area and all the berries, they're all oriented north-south, which is usually the best for light. But for these raised beds, I'm kind of thinking I want to orient them east-west. I just think they're going to fit better in this space that way. But we'll find out in a minute when we put them in their position. One of the most important parts of setting up raised beds is all of the prep work and making sure that's all done right. So we've scraped, we've raked, we've pulled out weeds, and now it is finally time to put down the weed barrier. What we're going to be using for weed barrier is these rolls of thick cardboard material. I really like using the kind that is biodegradable over like a plastic sort of weed barrier for a couple of reasons. One is we have done that before and we had terrible results with it. When you use like a synthetic ground cover and you put anything over top of it, it is just a recipe for weeds to grow into that and through all the plastic, and it just becomes a huge mess. The other thing is, even if you don't have anything on top of the plastic, if you put something with pressure on top of that, like your raised bed, it's just enough pressure that the soil underneath, something can sprout up there and also grow up through the plastic. We just prefer the biodegradable stuff, and it does mean that we have to lay down more every single year, but I would much rather do that than have all of the trouble with the plastic later on.
Your Royal Highness, Queen Becky is coming.
We got the weed barrier paper all laid down. Now it's time to fill the beds. We are going to do a combination of different things. We're going to do topsoil, compost, some cocoa peat and some perlite in these, and then a bunch of amendments as well. So we started out by grabbing some topsoil. Our idea was just to grab some topsoil from the woods. We thought that would be good. Cam brought it over here. It was very muddy and started putting it in the bed, and we realized it was about 80 to 90% rocks and very, very little topsoil. Just put it all down there and I'll take out the rocks. I don't know, it's kind of bad.
Pretty crappy.
So at the moment, he is now scraping that back out, putting it back in the tractor bucket so that we can go find topsoil on our property somewhere else where it's a little bit better. We're thinking if we go down by where the cows usually hang out, it's going to be really nice stuff. So our hunch about the soil over by the cows was correct. It is much nicer over there. We just scraped right where their hay bale was because the pasture grass was already dead there. Cam just got the top couple of inches. Underneath that, there are some rocks, but there's just not as many as over by the woods. So it's kind of a mixture of hay and some topsoil, but I think that's gonna work great for inside these beds.
You want to go feed this to the chickens?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. He's just legitimately excited about it. It's fun.
Daddy, let's find some more.
They know you got some food.
Oh.
What happened?
This one ate all of them.
Oh yeah.
So that's a wrap for tonight. We're gonna head in for dinner. The kids are hungry, and so are we.
Yes. We wanted to fill up the raised beds about 50% with topsoil, and that's what we got. So on Monday, we'll come back and put on compost and all of the other things that we plan to add. I thought I would explain some of the decision making that's going on while we're working on this. Initially, I thought I would mix everything together really evenly, but because this topsoil is coming from our land and because it has a pretty significant amount of hay with it, I decided that we probably should just leave the topsoil hay mixture on the bottom of the beds and not mix that in with everything else. That's going to be beneficial for a couple of reasons. One is I'm a little bit worried that the hay is going to tie up nitrogen, so that'll keep that at the bottom until it breaks down a little bit. I'm also going to add a little extra nitrogen in the form of blood meal right over the top of the hay topsoil mixture. The other thing is that the topsoil is the one thing that is likely to have weed seeds in it as well as the hay. So keeping that on the bottom is going to make it so those weed seeds are less likely to germinate. I'm adding a whole cup of blood meal per bed, basically a half cup on each side. Since we're not mixing up the beds, the next thing I need to add is some lime. I am gonna mix it with this bottom layer because this has our native topsoil in it, and we've done soil testing before, and most of the soil around here, it lands at about a pH of 5.8. So it does need lime. The other things that we're adding to these raised beds, like the compost, perlite, and we're adding some cocoa coir, all of those things are more neutral in pH, so I do not need to account for them when I figure out how much lime I need to add. If I were to use peat moss instead of the cocoa coir, I would be adding a little bit more lime because peat moss is more acidic. The next thing that we're adding is some of Redmond's Mineralite Grow. I really like this stuff because it adds minerals, and this one, the Grow, it has extra poultry manure in it. So it's adding even more nitrogen to these beds, which they need because they have the hay in here and because they are brand new. So I'm just gonna add a cup of this Mineralite Grow per garden bed as well. These garden beds are 4 by 8 by 1 foot tall. So that's 32 cubic feet, and that's what I'm basing everything that I am measuring off of. So next is kelp meal. I'm going to add 1 cup of this per garden bed. The last thing that we're adding is this langbonite. Our soil is naturally low in potassium. So I know the topsoil that we grabbed is probably going to be low in potassium, and this is going to add it. The other thing I want to mention is we left these garden beds open on the bottom on purpose. It is really good if you can manage it to have your garden beds open on the bottom so that the plant roots can go down even deeper and they can get minerals from your soil as well. I forgot to mention I am just adding a 1/2 cup of this langbonite per garden bed. This is a 4 cubic foot bag of perlite, and we're going to add 1 per garden bed. This is good. I like leaving the hard labor part to you.
Yeah, you do. Compost is added, so last thing is to take this cocoa coir and spread this on top, and then we're gonna mix everything in. I gotta just act like this isn't heavy, because it's not heavy at all. Feel like I'm breaking up ground beef in a frying pan.
We got these raised beds from Landguard. We like them because we still get a premium look, but they're half the price of other brands. In the past, one of the hangups I had with raised beds is we used wood and it rotted out really quickly. So I love that these are metal and they're coated and they have a non-toxic coating. So they are safe to grow food in and they are gonna last a long time. So the other thing that they have is these internal support rods so that when you fill these beds with soil, the outsides, they don't bow out. We're also gonna be adding some of their accessories like trellises so that we can grow more in a smaller amount of space. They also have some really nice solar lights that complete the look of these beds and give a really nice glow at nighttime. So if you want a high-end look without a high price tag, Landguard raised beds are the way to go. We have a discount code. It's Seasonal Homestead 15 for 15% off, and you can use our link down in the video description below. After I put the cocoa coir in these beds, I realized that I really didn't get enough. And instead of running back to the store and getting more, I just grabbed some peat moss that we have from our tunnels and I added a cubic foot of peat moss to each of these raised beds. So that does mean that I need to go back and add some lime. For each cubic foot of peat moss, I'm adding a 1/2 cup of lime. So now I'm just mixing the top 3 layers of these raised beds together and leaving the topsoil hay mixture at the bottom if possible. Some of it's gonna mix in, but hopefully not too much because I'd really like to leave all of the weed seeds down at the bottom. This mixture on the top, it's very similar to what I use to make my seed starting mix. So it's gonna be great for little seedlings. And then as the seedlings grow, they're gonna have access to the topsoil underneath and be able to get all of the minerals and nutrients that they need as they grow bigger. So one thing I know from experience with raised beds is that the soil tends to settle a lot, especially if there's a lot of organic matter in there. As it breaks down, everything will start to get lower and lower. So we made sure that we really filled these raised beds to the very top. We actually overfilled some of them. We came back and added a 1/2 scoop of compost to each bed and mixed together the top couple of inches. So now all we need to do is water the soil. The kids are gonna plant, we're gonna set up trellises, and I think that's it. But first we're gonna take a lunch break and then we'll come back out and finish everything. I'm scared.
I just finished our latest As You Wish project. Becky says, I need you to build an arch in between these raised beds. So what do I say? As you wish. No, I really do enjoy building these. It only took me maybe 2 hours from start to finish to get these up. It's basically two 16-foot cattle panels that are arching over. I used 6-foot T-posts because I wanted the arch to stay straight until about this point. If we hadn't have done that, this cattle panel has the tendency to kind of bow out unless you suck it in. And so I wanted something to tie to. So being this high, it's straight till here and then it arches over. Looks really good. I got one of these arches up and I'm tying it with rope and it's just kind of cumbersome. And I realized I've got some steel wire in the barn, so I'm gonna go grab that. My wire from the barn. It's gonna hold a ton better. I should have just done that from the beginning, but that's fine. I should have these arches done pretty quick. Noelle's already out here getting her garden started, and so once we get some vines and cucumbers and things like that growing up here, then it's gonna look pretty cool.
That's a wrap for this project. We got everything done that we wanted to get done, and it is ready to plant. I'm really happy with how everything turned out, and Kim built this cute little arch trellis for the kids. I think they're really gonna like that over the summer. Just add a little bit of vertical space for them, and then they have 7.5-foot tall trellises over there for their tomatoes, which we actually do need here because the tomatoes, they grow very tall. So Noelle's planting now. Dax isn't home, so he's not planting yet, but he'll come back and plant later. It seems like they're really enjoying it already. So now that we're all finished building those raised beds, it's time to go over to our family garden, which is all in ground. And we're gonna show you the one thing that we did to drop our weeding down to less than an hour per week last year. And we're gonna do it all over again this year. Last year, Cam was still working at his office job, and that left me to maintain our half-acre garden all by myself. So I was desperate to find some kind of a solution to cut down the amount of time it took me each week to weed the whole garden. Plastic is a very popular option for weed prevention, but we personally prefer biodegradable options. So included in that is things like cardboard, straw, hay, wood chip mulch. Every method has its pros and cons, but one that I recently discovered probably 3 years ago that had a lot more benefits than downsides was this weed prevention paper. Last year I started using weed prevention paper with the pre-cut holes in it, or as Cam likes to call it, holy paper. I had so many people ask me where we got this paper from, but at the time it was not available for sale. So I have good news. This holy paper is for sale right now on farmersfriend.com, and you can use our link down in the video description, which gives you early access to get this right now. This paper saves me time in a lot of ways, not just in weed prevention, but because it already has the pre-cut holes, I don't have to go through and cut a little slit in this paper all the way down. If you can see how many holes are in this paper, that would take so long, especially for something like we're gonna be planting onions in these. That would take forever. So I'm really excited that they have an option where it's all pre-cut and it saves me time, and it's all already spaced out perfectly, so I can maximize the amount of plants that I put in this space, and they're all nice and evenly spaced. So we decided to lay down just one row of this weed prevention paper for right now. It's about 280 holes, so I can plant 280 onions in this space. Last year we did closer to 500 onions, and that was a little bit too many. It really depends on the year though. Some years the onions are very large and they bulb up really big. Other years they're not as big. So it's always kind of a little bit of a gamble. Paper shrinks when it gets wet. So you want to make sure you wet down this paper all the way, not just a little wet, but like thoroughly wet, so that it can get wet, dry, and then shrink completely before you plant in it. The best way to get the paper wet is just to use a sprinkler and set it up and let it run for like 20 minutes. I'm doing this by hand, but it is a very slow process of making sure it's really, really wet. So if you just set a sprinkler, then you can set it and forget it and walk away. Not really forget it, but you need to turn it off when you're done. We came out this morning to plant the onions, but if you remember yesterday, we wet down the paper and it wasn't completely dry yet. And it's very important for it to be dry before planting. So instead, I'm going to plant our lettuce in paper. I prepped this maybe 2 weeks ago. It's been sitting here way too long. This is an example of what seedlings look like when they're in their containers for too long and they haven't been fertilized properly. So you can see right here the yellowing of the leaves. That just means they're low in nitrogen and they really need to get in the ground. So we're gonna do that right now. This is the perfect opportunity. I also wanted to report back on these air-pruning trays that I said I was testing out. These are really cool. This is the first thing that I've tested in these is the lettuce, and it does a really good job of what it's supposed to do, air pruning at the bottom. And they have these really big holes at the bottom, so they just pop right out. And it was a lot easier to fill and make this tray than soil blocks. You can fit a lot more in a smaller amount of space, is kind of what I'm trying to say. And it has the same effect. Since we were working on the fence, I did not transplant my onions as I had planned, so I just kept potting them up to bigger pots. So a lot of them are in these big 4-inch pots, and the onions are quite a bit bigger than they normally are when I transplant them. That is actually a good thing, but it also means that their tops are really long, so we are going to give them a little bit of a haircut to make it easier to transplant them. I'm always surprised at what a big difference it makes to pot up your seedlings as they are growing. So I left some in this tray over here because I didn't think I needed that many onions, and I potted up the rest of them. And the ones in these bigger pots, they are huge. The ones that are still in the tray are so tiny. We are not going to waste these onions. I'm going to take them inside and stick them straight into the freezer. Prior to putting down this paper, we prepped the garden bed by adding a bunch of fertilizer to this. We added a little bit of alfalfa meal, and we also added some mineral-like grow to this area. So we don't need to add any fertilizer as we're planting because we already put that underneath. Oh, look at that, beautiful. I just need to separate them out. We got one garden bed completely planted with the onions, and I still have a lot of onions that I started from seeds still in the tunnel, which is really good news. That means that we are going to roll out another thing of paper so that we can plant more onions. I would rather have too many than too little, so I'm glad that we have enough to do an entire other row here. One of the things that we've learned over the years of using this method of weed prevention is it's very, very important to make sure it stays in place. Otherwise, it will blow away with the wind and get torn to shreds. And we really don't want that to happen. So there are multiple things that you can use to get the paper to stay down. One of them is using these sticks with the washers. Another thing you can use is some kind of mulch, compost, straw, or hay over the top. I would highly recommend that if you are in a very windy area. Over where our peas are, we have a very large area of open bare ground, which I don't like and I want to make sure we cover. So we're going to put paper over there, and over in that area I'm not going to use the stakes. I'm just going to put hay over the top of that to keep it all down and to suppress weeds. Using paper plus hay, that's a more surefire way to make sure weeds don't pop up through. Over in this area We planted garlic here back in November. We put some hay over the top, albeit it wasn't super thick. And then once springtime came around, there was a lot of weeds germinating in here. In my experience, it's not really from the hay having seeds in it. It's more because the hay is laid down too thinly. We've been gardening here long enough to know that if we didn't have hay down at all, we would have so many more weeds here. The hay, it's one step better, but going over there and doing paper plus hay, that's even one step further to make sure we're doing as little weeding as possible. We still have a lot more paper and mulch to lay down, but we'll finish that up behind the scenes because I know it is not the most exciting part of gardening, but it makes such a big difference, and that's why I wanted to share it with you guys. Finding ways to prevent weeds has been a total game changer for us, and it's finally letting us focus on the parts of gardening that we actually enjoy. Also, it's hard to believe, but we already need to do a big harvest. So in next week's video, I'll show you what we're picking and how we're getting it all preserved for the pantry.